Meet Jess and Priya, both 32, both living in Brisbane, both earning $95,000 a year, and after years of discipline, skipping the smashed ovo when they genuinely wanted it, and convincing themselves that the generic supermarket pasta is basically the same as the Italian stuff, they've both managed to save $90,000. Financially, they are identical. In every other way, not even close. Jess wants roots. She wants a place that is permanently hers, a backyard she can slowly become obsessive about, the ability to paint the walls without asking anyone's permission, the feeling of stability that comes from knowing nobody can tell her to move out at the end of a lease. She wants to buy. Priya wants flexibility. She likes keeping her options open. The idea of committing to the same suburb for 30 years makes her quietly anxious in a way she can't fully explain. She doesn't know where she'll be in 5 years, and she's genuinely fine with that. She wants to keep renting. Same income, same savings. Completely different decisions. For the next 20 years, we're going to follow them both. Every mortgage repayment, every rent increase, every council rates notice, and every dollar Priya saves by renting and actually invests. Then we'll see where they each end up. Let's find out. Jess finds a 3-bedroom house in a solid Brisbane suburb. Not flashy, but good bones, a decent backyard, and a street she can see herself on long term. The purchase price is $750,000. She puts down $90,000, which is exactly 12%. Since she's below the 20% threshold, she'll pay lenders mortgage insurance, which on a loan of this size runs to roughly $15,000, typically rolled into the loan. Then there's stamp duty. In Queensland, an investor buying at $750,000 pays around $25,000 in stamp duty. But as an owner-occupier, Jess gets a concession, bringing it closer to $14,000. Add conveyancing, building and pest inspections, and loan establishment fees, and her upfront costs beyond the deposit come to around $20,000. So before she unpacks a single box, Jess has committed her entire $90,000. The deposit, the stamp duty, the fees, the lot. She takes out a $660,000 mortgage plus the LMI at a 6.2% interest rate over 30 years. Her monthly principal and interest repayment is around $4,050. Add council rates of roughly $350 a month, home and contents insurance of $200, and a maintenance budget of $625 a month, which is about 1% of the property value annually, and Jess's total monthly housing cost is approximately $5,225. Priya rents a comparable 3-bedroom house nearby for $2,800 a month. No stamp duty, no maintenance bills, no lender's mortgage insurance. If the hot water system fails on a Sunday morning, that is her landlord's inconvenience, not hers. That leaves Priya with an extra $2,425 every month compared to Jess. And here is the critical assumption that determines whether the whole comparison works. Priya invests it, all of it, every month, without exception. She also puts her entire $90,000 into a diversified share portfolio on day one. Half into VAS for Australian shares and franking credits, half into VGS for global exposure. A simple, low-cost portfolio that has historically returned around 9% per year on average, including dividends. In the early years, Priya's position looks strong. She lives in a comparable house, pays less each month, and has a growing investment portfolio. Now here's the thing people always say at this point. But Priya is throwing money away on rent. Jess is building equity. And technically, yes, Jess is building equity. But let's be honest about how slowly that happens at the start. In her first month, Jess pays around $3,400 in mortgage interest. That is the majority of her repayment. Only about $650 actually reduces her loan balance. The rest of her monthly cost, the council rates, the insurance, the maintenance allocation, is simply the cost of owning the property. It's not building equity. It's the price of being a homeowner. Meanwhile, Priya pays $2,800 in rent. Yes, that builds no equity. But pretending that mortgage interest, stamp duty, insurance, and the inevitable plumbing disaster are all investments, while calling rent dead money, is not an honest comparison. Let's move forward 3 years. Jess has made 36 repayments and learned the core truth of property ownership. Every unusual sound eventually costs money. The fence needs replacing. The dishwasher gives up. The downpipes blocked during the first major storm of the wet season. Fortunately, her maintenance budget has been absorbing most of it. At 3 to 4% annual growth, her $750,000 property is now worth somewhere between $820,000 and $844,000. Her loan balance has come down to around $645,000. That leaves Jess with equity of roughly $175,000 to $200,000. Real growing wealth. Priya's $90,000 invested at 9% annually has grown to around $116,000 in those 3 years. Add 36 months of $2,425 in monthly contributions and their compounding growth, and her total portfolio sits at around $260,000. After 3 years, Priya is ahead on paper in liquid assets, but Jess's equity is real and growing in the background. Now let's look at what changes over time, because time is where this comparison gets genuinely interesting. Jess's principal and interest repayment is fixed. It does not move for 30 years. But Priya's rent is not fixed. Brisbane rents have been rising at around 5 to 7% a year in recent years, though we'll use a more conservative 3.5% annually for our long-run projection. At that rate, Priya's $2,800 a month becomes $3,300 after 5 years, around $3,900 after 10, and approaches $5,400 after 20 years. As Priya's rent rises, the monthly gap between her costs and Jess's narrows. The $2,425 advantage she started with begins to shrink. And as it shrinks, the amount she's investing each month shrinks too. The comparison gets tighter with every passing year. Let's jump to year 10. Jess's property at 3 to 4% annual growth is now worth somewhere between $1,007,000 and $1,110,000. Her loan balance is around $590,000. That gives her equity of roughly $417,000 to $520,000. She owns a meaningful portion of a property now worth over $1 million in a major Australian capital city. Priya's original $90,000 has grown to around $213,000 at 9% annually. Add 10 years of declining monthly contributions as her rent has risen, and her total portfolio sits at around $580,000. After 10 years, Priya is still ahead in liquid net worth, but her rent is now approaching $4,000 a month, and Jess's mortgage repayment hasn't moved. Year 20. Both women are 52. Jess's property at consistent 3 to 4% annual growth is now worth between $1,350,000 and $1,650,000. Her remaining loan balance is around $480,000. Her equity sits somewhere between $870,000 and $1,170,000. She has 10 years left on the mortgage, after which her housing cost drops dramatically. Priya's portfolio has been compounding for 20 years. The original $90,000 has grown to around $504,000 on its own. Add 20 years of diminishing monthly contributions and their compounding returns, and her total portfolio sits at around $1,100,000. On raw numbers, Priya is still marginally ahead in total wealth, but the picture looks very different when you look at what each of them faces next. Jess has a mortgage with 10 years to run and an asset worth well over $1 million. In 10 years, her mortgage is gone and her housing cost drops to rates, insurance, and maintenance. She will live essentially rent-free for the rest of her life in a property that has likely continued appreciating. Priya's rent after 20 years of 3.5% annual increases is now around $5,600 a month. It has no finish line. At 52, she faces the prospect of paying rent at 62, at 72, at 82. Every year the rent rises. Every year, another chunk of her investment portfolio is required to fund it. The portfolio that looks strong at 52 has to work considerably harder than Jess's equity to fund the same quality of retirement. And this brings us to the condition that determines whether Priya's strategy actually works. She had to invest every dollar of the difference, every month, for 20 years. When the market dropped 35% during a bad year, she kept investing. When her friends were buying properties and it felt like she was falling behind, she kept investing. When the money could have gone toward a nicer car or a longer holiday, it went into the portfolio instead. The spreadsheet assumes perfect discipline. People are not spreadsheets. Jess's mortgage, on the other hand, requires no discipline. The bank collects the repayment automatically. She doesn't decide each month whether she feels like building equity. The decision was made once at settlement and has been running on autopilot ever since. For many Australians, that forced saving mechanism is the single most valuable feature of home ownership. Not the capital growth, not the tax treatment, the fact that it happens whether you feel motivated or not. But buying has real weaknesses too. Concentration risk is the one most homeowners never think about. Priya's portfolio holds thousands of companies across dozens of countries. Jess owns one house on one street in one suburb of one city. If Brisbane performs well, Jess benefits. If the local economy or that specific suburb underperforms, she has no way to rebalance. You cannot sell the third bedroom independently of the rest of the house. Liquidity is the other one. If Priya needs $30,000, she sells part of her portfolio and has cash in 3 days. If Jess needs $30,000, she refinances, draws on a redraw facility, or sells the property. Home equity is genuine wealth, but it is not easy wealth to access. And mobility matters more in Australia than most people acknowledge. If Jess gets offered a significantly better opportunity in Melbourne or Perth 3 years into her mortgage, she can move. But she's either selling during a period where the transaction costs may not have been fully absorbed by growth, or she's becoming an accidental landlord managing a Brisbane property from another state. Priya can hand in her notice and be on a plane in 6 weeks. So which one wins? The honest answer is it depends entirely on two things: how long you stay and whether you invest the difference. Buying becomes more powerful the longer you stay. 10 years or more gives the transaction costs time to be absorbed, the principal to compound, and the asset to appreciate through multiple market cycles. In Australia's major capital cities, the long-run case for holding property is strong. Renting becomes more powerful the more disciplined you are. If Priya genuinely invested every dollar she saved for 20 years, she built serious wealth and kept her options open the whole time. If she spent half of it on lifestyle and holidays, the comparison collapses completely. For most Australians, the best answer isn't choosing between these two paths. It's understanding the trade-offs of each and making the decision deliberately rather than by default. Jess traded flexibility and liquidity for stability, leverage, and a housing cost that eventually disappears. Priya traded certainty for flexibility, liquidity, and a portfolio she can access on any given Tuesday. Neither of them was wrong. But 20 years later, neither of them got there by accident either. If this gave you a new way to think about one of the biggest financial decisions most Australians will ever make, hit the like button and subscribe. Next video, I'm going to walk through exactly how the Australian property market's historical returns compare to the ASX across different time periods and where the numbers actually diverge from the popular narrative. See you there.